Assemble.
Come on, people.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Dean Johnson won't stop talking.
Good morning. I call to order the March meeting of the Board of Regents of the University of Minnesota. Thank you very much.
Take that microphone.
Good morning. Regent McMillan is joining us by electronic. David?
Good morning, Chair Beeson. Calling in, yes.
Great. Thank you. President Kaler, would you begin today's meeting with some introductions and recognitions?
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I will. Dr. Jackson, would you please join me at the podium? Mr. Chair and members of the board, it's my pleasure to introduce to you our new Dean of the Medical School and Vice President for Health Sciences, Dr. Brooks Jackson. In his new role, Dr. Jackson is, of course, responsible for the excellence in our medical school and for affiliated clinical education settings around the state. He also leads the Academic Health Center, which includes interprofessional education and research through the School of Dentistry, the College of Pharmacy, the School of Public Health, the School of Nursing, College of Veterinary Medicine, and a large host of interdisciplinary centers and programs. Dr. Jackson is a globally recognized researcher in HIV diagnostics, prevention, and treatment, and is a highly experienced leader, educator, and clinician. Before joining us last month, he was the top funded researcher in a top department at one of the nation's best medical schools, Johns Hopkins University. And very importantly, Dr. Jackson is a dedicated alum of our own medical school's pathology residency, served as a junior faculty member at the University of Minnesota's medical school at the start of his career, and worked in the Minneapolis VA Medical Center. I could not be more pleased to welcome Dr. Jackson back to the University of Minnesota. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much, Eric. I'm very pleased to be able to have the opportunity to come back to the university. I really enjoyed my time here, and I think there'll be great opportunities looking forward. It was a pleasure to meet many, or if not most, of the regents yesterday and be able to provide a tour and overview of the academic health sciences yesterday and give you many, many doctor degrees. That was great, and glad to see that you're here early in the morning and can go to work like the rest of us. So, but again, I really look forward to my time here and the years ahead. And again, thank you everyone for this opportunity. Thanks.
Brooks. Those of you in the audience may not know that the board did yesterday spend the full day in the Academic Health Center, and they received many, many doctor degrees. And we got a little certificate that said we had many, many doctor degrees. And on the back of that certificate, in an abundance of clarity, it points out that this is not an accredited degree program by anybody. Fortunately, we didn't pay full price for it either, so that worked out. Mr. Chair, members of the board, it's my pleasure to introduce to you the new President and Chief Executive Officer of the University of Minnesota Foundation, Kathleen Schmidlkoffer. Please join me, Kathy. Kathy began her new role earlier this month and comes to the foundation from Greater MSP, the private nonprofit organization dedicated to providing public and private sector leadership, coordination, and engagement to grow the economy of the Minneapolis-St. Paul metropolitan region. Prior to helping found and establish Greater MSP, she held a variety of increasingly responsible finance roles over a 25-year career at General Mills. Kathy is past chair and continues to serve on the board of Tubman, a Twin Cities nonprofit that promotes violence-free communities, families, and relationships. She's also on the board of the St. Paul Foundation and a member of the Minnesota Women's Economic Roundtable. A CPA, she holds an MBA, it's a lot of initials there, from our Carlson School of Management. Kathy, welcome. Please say a few words.
Thank you. Well, it's great to be here. Thank you, President Kaler. Thank you to the Regents for allowing me actually to be in my dream job now. It really is a capstone to what has been a really great foundational career to really represent the university now and connect donors to all the great things that are going across the university. The university has been near and dear to my heart as a personal resident throughout my adult life, whether it's attending the Carlson School of Management, attending Gopher Athletics, or all the great events that go on at the Wiseman in Northrop. But more importantly, the connection that the university has had throughout my career, whether it's with General Mills, the Itasca Project, or Greater MSP, has been a wonderful partner to make sure that our state's and region's economic health stays very competitive. So it's great to be here. Thank you.
Provost Hanson, would you please join me at the podium as we recognize the recipients of this year's McKnight Land Grant Professor Awards.
Thank you, President Kaler, and good morning. I'm privileged to recognize this year's recipients of the McKnight Land Grant Professorship Award, which is designed to advance the careers of our most promising junior faculty members at the beginning stages of their professional careers. The McKnight Land Grant Professorship is a 2-year appointment that includes a research grant of $25,000 in each of the 2 years. Each recipient will also receive today a certificate that reads, "The Regents of the University of Minnesota, on the advice of the faculty and the Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost, hereby appoints him or her as a 2014-2016 McKnight Land Grant Professor in recognition of significant potential for academic distinction with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities attached thereto." And it's signed by Brian Steeves, Executive Director, Eric W. Kaler, President, and Richard Beeson, Board Chair. There are 8 recipients this year, whom we will invite up one by one. President Kaler and I will present the certificate, and then we'll read a brief summary of the work that each recipient will pursue with the support of the award. Recipients, after receiving your certificate, please join Chair Beeson and President Kaler and me at the Regents seal for a photo, then step to your right and wait while the other recipients come up and are recognized, and then we'll ask you to all pose for a group photo before greeting the Regents and returning to your seat. So we'll begin with David J. Flanagan, Assistant Professor, Chemical Engineering and Materials Science, College of Science and Engineering.
Here we go.
Dr. Flanagan works on materials science at the space-time limit with ultra-fast transmission electron microscopy. Current transmission electron microscopes are able to reach subatomic spatial resolutions that cannot be used to image dynamic events that occur faster than a few milliseconds. To overcome this, Dr. Flanagan is working to develop a new electron microscopy technology that will enable direct visualization of brief events occurring at the atomic scale. So, congratulations. Sarah E. Gollust, Assistant Professor, Health Policy and Management, School of Public Health.
Oh, we didn't follow directions.
Let's let Regent get here.
There we go.
I almost skipped it. Okay, great.
Okay.
So, I apologize, Sarah. Sarah E. Gollust, Assistant Professor, Health Policy and Management, School of Public Health. Dr. Gollust leverages communication science to illuminate and overcome health policy challenges. She analyzes the process through which health information shapes public opinion and affects policymaking. In her assessments of obesity policy, cancer screening, and the Affordable Care Act, Dr. Gollust identifies challenges that arise in the translation process with the goal of informing more effective communication strategies.
Okay, we might take a picture. We have 8 chances to get this right.
Christophe Langley, Assistant Professor, Radiology, Medical School. Dr. Langley works to map the human brain through advanced computational techniques for magnetic resonance imaging. Understanding the human brain remains one of the greatest scientific challenges of the 21st century. Magnetic resonance imaging, MRI technology, offers the unique opportunity to non-invasively map the wiring of the brain. Dr. Langley's research lies at the crossroads of mathematics, computer science, and neuroscience, and he's working to create tools that may lead to groundbreaking insights into our brain architecture. Pamela Lotzi, Assistant Professor, Epidemiology and Community Health, School of Public Health. Dr. Lutzley is working to identify novel and modifiable risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Dr. Lutzley is a cardiovascular disease epidemiologist whose mission and passion is finding the factors that influence cardiovascular disease risk and that could be cost-effectively addressed. She's particularly interested in the role low vitamin D levels and sleep apnea play on the risk of developing cardiovascular disease. Francis X. Shen, Associate Professor, Law School. Dr. Shen studies how neuroscience will transform law. Brain science is of increasing interest in legal and policy arenas. Better understanding of brain function offers both promise and peril. Dr. Shen uses innovative empirical legal methods to explore how the effective use of neuroscientific evidence can enhance legal doctrine and also how the premature misuse of such evidence can be detrimental to justice. James D. Vandenven, Assistant Professor, Mechanical Engineering, College of Science and Engineering. Dr. Vandenven works on innovations in energy storage and conversion with fluid power. His research goal is to find innovative solutions to the problem of storing and converting hydraulic and pneumatic energy. This has large potential for impact because 3% of U.S. energy is transmitted by fluid power. Dr. Vandenven's energy storage research helps to integrate the wind and other renewables into the power grid and enables hydraulic hybrid vehicles. Shannon Drysdale Walsh, Assistant Professor, Political Science, University of Minnesota, Duluth. Dr. Walsh's area of study is state responses to violence against women in Latin America. Violence against women is a worldwide problem, one surging in Latin America. Dr. Walsh compares the ways in which 5 Latin American countries have developed and transformed their justice systems. She's studying how transnational advocacy networks have created and transformed institutions that help protect and provide justice for women on a global scale. Travis Workman, Asian Languages and Literatures, College of Arts and Sciences, College of Liberal Arts, sorry. Dr. Workman's area of study is melodrama and the Cold War, ideas and emotion in Korean cinemas. Melodrama is a popular cinematic mode that uses heightened emotion and sentimentality to present the world as divided between agents of moral goodness and the threat of corruption. Dr. Workman's research explores the political, social, and humanist ideas of Cold War melodrama in the cinematic cultures of both sides of the Cold War, focusing on the South Korea and the North Korean film industries. Yes, so everyone come over and
I'm going to bring you forward here. Right up here. It's easier to just do what he says first. Come on up. I haven't met you yet. Come on in. Come on. Don't be shy. Here we go.
Pretty quickly, I'm out the door.
Put you guys right up in here.
What do you, Dean?
She's going to duck you out.
Requires 2 of these to get you through?
He's got them stacked up there.
How long can you play solitaire?
Yeah, there we go. So I can see you now. Perfect. Wow. You assemble well. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. About 5 of us, okay? Calm now. Okay. Yeah. Hold on one more. Perfect. Thank you very much. Congratulations. See y'all again.
please join me in congratulating this year's McKnight Land Grant professors.
Hi, my name's Eric.
Well, congratulations, Dr. Jackson, Ms. Schmidlkoffer, and the awardees today under the McKnight Land Grant program. Okay, let's move on to business then with approval of the minutes for February 13th and 14th meeting. Is there a motion to approve minutes? There is a motion and a second that I'll accept. Is there any discussion? Not hearing any. All those in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. We recorded your vote, Regent McMillan. Thank you.
Okay.
Voice of God.
Next, we'll go to the report of the President. President Kaler, would you share your report with us today?
Thank you, Chair Beeson, members of the board. I was going to add my congratulations to the group of McKnight professors. It's wonderful to be young and smart and at the University of Minnesota. And I'm very pleased that they've all gotten up and left and went back to work. So that's a very good sign, I think. But I do offer my congratulations. Typically, during these reports, I do bring you up to date with the range of events and achievements and places I've been and people I've seen, and they range typically from athletics to zoology. But today, I thought I would focus instead on really the power and the impact that's been reported in just the past few weeks around one topic at the university, and that topic is our research productivity. Research illustrates our deep contributions to the state and to understanding in science, education, technology, and cultural history, among other fields. As Regents, you know how important our role is as the state's only comprehensive research university. And that was brought home yesterday for many of you, I think, during our tour of the Academic Health Center. but I've been exhilarated and, in fact, exhausted by keeping up with the onslaught of news made by our faculty, researchers, and students, and for recognitions they've received on front pages of newspapers from New York to Johannesburg and on airwaves from London to St. Paul. So let me start with this, a smartphone. This happens to be a very old smartphone. I think the Smithsonian is going to want this back soon, but it contains a huge number of inventions. And with help from Google, our University of Minnesota computer scientists, including our top graduate students, are going to change the way you and I use that device. Across campus in the basement of Walter Library, they are developing the capability to create three-dimensional maps on smartphones and other devices. And before long, that software will, I believe, help blind people walk unaided through a building and create other breakthroughs and opportunities. It's a 3D technology that grew from an earlier partnership funded by NASA to create navigational software for Mars landing vehicles. And that demonstrates, I think, powerfully the impact of basic research. Public and private partnerships and federal support have long funded basic research in the United States. And that research eventually drives all sorts of discoveries, life-changing innovations for you and me and millions of others around the world. But as you know, over the past few years, federal support for basic research has been significantly reduced. And this decline comes, unfortunately, as many other nations are raising their higher education research investments and are frankly becoming globally much more competitive in the process. We must re-energize federal funding of this research, and I hope that your voices are heard in that debate. But despite the pullback by the federal government, I'm proud to say here at the university we've been aggressive in working with our industry partners and, of course, with the state of Minnesota in our MnDrive partnership to keep basic research healthy. Let me tell you about another breakthrough. People have long wondered about the effects of early school start times for high school students. Our College of Education and Human Development research on this question recently made headlines nationwide. Our research demonstrated that schools with later start times produce better academic outcomes for students, something known, I think, to all of you who have been parents of high school students. As a result, even more districts are moving to start later times for high school students, benefiting countless students and families, but also, some data show, helping to close the educational achievement gap. Let me tell you about an exciting interdisciplinary project. A $9.5 million grant from the National Institutes of Health was awarded to a team of researchers from both the medical school and the College of Science and Engineering to tackle pain associated with sickle cell disease. It's that kind of research to find cures and treatments that has been continuously a theme in our health sciences history. Researchers at UMD are advancing science and society as well. When Regent McMillan builds a house sometime soon or fixes his kitchen, he will benefit from the work of scientists at UMD's Natural Resources Research Institute. They recently received a grant from the National Science Foundation to create more environmentally positive wood products by strengthening weak wood species. The goal is to drive the increased use of renewable, sustainable, and carbon-storing material. Turning to the liberal arts and the basic questions of what it means to be human, research matters too. Nationally, scholars are interested in understanding the so-called pre-modern period between the 1500s and 1800s to learn about topics such as human rights, economic opportunity, the environment, and political diversity from a non-European perspective. Because our scholars in the College of Liberal Arts are leaders in that area, the Andrew Mellon Foundation has provided a large grant to support their work, bringing new perspectives to the understanding of history and culture and what it means for our students and for us today. Further back, nearly 14 billion years ago, the question exists, how was our universe created? Turns out we have that covered too, right here on our Twin Cities campus. In a research partnership with the National Science Foundation, Harvard, Stanford, and Caltech, not bad partners, our physics and astronomy associate professor Clement Pike confirmed the imprint of gravitational waves on the cosmic microwave background. It's the leftover radiation 1/trillionth of a trillionth of a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang. It sounds complicated, and it is. But like Pike and his colleagues confirmed, the so-called inflation after the Big Bang occurred. And there's not much more fundamentally mysterious than that. So I think each of these examples demonstrates that in our labs and in our classrooms, we're saving lives and changing lives, exploding myths and creating new ideas. Each of these projects improves the ingenuity, the curiosity, and the world-class status of our faculty, our students, and our staff. Our research places us in the conversation when people across the country wonder which universities are leading the nation in innovation. And with that, our reputation grows. The value of our degrees for our students and our alumni increases, and the best students, undergraduate and graduate, want to come to the University of Minnesota. And of course, that research drives an enormous practical impact, grows the economic health and prosperity of the region. It's been a wonderful thing to brag about the research at the University of Minnesota. Let me turn briefly to a couple of other topics before I conclude. First is our activity at the legislature. Our capital request is moving along. House Capital Investment Chair Alice Hausman's bonding proposal provides $224.2 million to the university and includes full funding for 5 of our 6 priority projects. Provides a strong boost for our students in Minnesota's economy. But unfortunately, that bill provides only $40 million of the $100 million we've requested for HEAPR, and that's the same amount as the governor's request. So we need to continue to advocate for our renovation funding to meet current needs. We're hearing the House is likely to issue another bonding bill earlier next week, and we will, of course, support the university's request across the board. We're still waiting for the Senate to respond to our capital request. On another matter, yesterday several of our leaders provided updates to legislative committees about campus safety, operational excellence, and our ongoing performance metrics, and I'm pleased to report those presentations were well received. I'd like to note the significant amount of progress we've continued to make on our operational excellence initiatives, and with the Enterprise Systems Upgrade Program providing a bedrock foundation for a wide variety of future improvements. In addition to the hard work many people are putting into our ESOP project, we've already completed many of the Huron recommendations and are well on our way to completing others, and we'll provide you a more complete update in May. As far as our legislatively mandated, requested performance metrics and at-risk funding, we're making strong progress on every single one, and we're firmly on track. I think it is, in fact, fair to say we have picked up the pace in innovation at the University of Minnesota. Finally, a week from today, we will celebrate a historic milestone, the reopening of Northrop Auditorium. The new Northrop is a true monument to interdisciplinary education, academic excellence, and world-class performance. It's a model for public-private philanthropic collaboration, and I look forward to seeing you all there as we launch a new and meaningful era of Northrop's iconic role on our Twin Cities campus. So with that, Mr. Chair, I conclude my report. Thank you.
Thank you, President Kaler. The board had an active and productive day yesterday, beginning with a breakfast and informal discussion with state legislators in St. Paul. During this year's legislative session, we're taking part in a number of activities to support the university's capital request, as the President alluded to. Regents have attended legislative hearings where President Kaler and senior officials have presented the capital request and updates on public safety. And despite our full day yesterday, I couldn't miss taking part in the Support the U Day rally at Kaufman Union, where nearly 200 of our students gathered before heading out to the state capitol to meet with legislators and advocate for the university. It was really a great event. Following our breakfast with legislators, Regents spent the day visiting the medical school and the health science programs here south of Washington Avenue. Each year, the board highlights a number of topics for particular emphasis. One of the board's priorities for 2013 and 14 is to support the long-term success of the Academic Health Center. This visit allows Regents to gain a fuller understanding of the university and helps equip us to be as effective as possible in our governance role. It was a wonderful day, and the board was energized by the experience. Thank you, Vice President Jackson and your staff, for hosting us there. Between the white coats that we had on for a few hours and the many degrees that we received at the end of the day, it sort of confirmed the theory of little knowledge is dangerous as we move forward with our medical knowledge. Finally, we capped off the day by attending the Norman Borlaug celebration, and it was a great event as well. It was inspirational, reminding us of the impact the University of Minnesota has on the world from Dr. Borlaug, who attended here in the 1930s. We're thrilled at the reveal of a statue of Norman Borlaug that will be displayed on the St. Paul campus. That is a replica of the one unveiled Tuesday in the Capitol National Statuary Hall. Since our meeting in February, the Regents have also been engaged in a number of activities throughout the university and around the state. This week, Regent Cohen attended the closing dinner for the Tom Burnett Leadership Program. She served as a mentor for one of 12 undergraduate students involved in the Personal Leadership Program this semester. Thank you, Regent Cohen. Some other highlights included a mini college visit in Phoenix with Friends of the University, alumni events for the Carlson School and the Morris campus, an event welcoming admitted African American students to our campus, awards and presentations for the NCAA Swimming and Diving Championship, National Championship, held at the Aquatic Center. And finally, and importantly, the President's Day of the University address, which was a reminder of the progress we've made over the past year and an inspirational call for continued reform and pursuit of our excellence. With that, I'll move on to reports received and filed, including the quarterly report of grant and contract activity, the annual capital financing and debt management report, Facilities and Operations Committee information item, all contained in your packet. Next, I'll move to the consent report. We have 4 items on there, and I would entertain a motion and a second to approve those.
Second.
There is a motion and a second to approve the consent report. Is there any discussion on those items? Not hearing any, would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next is our Board of Regents policy regarding the student representatives to the Board of Regents. And you'll recall that we discussed proposed amendments to this policy at our February 14th meeting. At that time, I outlined the goals of those changes, which were to, number 1, ensure that each student representative understands the role and is prepared to effectively present the student voice to the board. Number 2, reinforce a culture of professionalism and responsibility through clear expectations. And finally, align board policy with current practice. Since that meeting, we've heard feedback from the student government organizations on each campus, as well as from current student representatives. We thank all those groups and individuals for their spirited engagement with this process and have been made aware of the concerns that were raised, as well as where there's clear support for the proposed changes. As noted in the doc materials, a few adjustments were made in response to the comments we received. Although some are still concerned, I do not believe it's unreasonable for the board to establish minimal selection criteria and expectations for an advisory committee created as input to our governance work. The goal here is to ensure that we continue to hear from a broad cross-section of those students most closely connected to the student experience at the university and those campuses, while also reinforcing the importance of academics. Academics is and must remain the first priority for students here at the university, and the proposed policy language setting a base level of achievement supports that priority. So at this time, I'd like to see if there are any other additional comments, final comments before we vote on adopting this set of proposed amendments. Regent Simmons.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I would just like to thank you and the students for leading us to this point where I think we have a policy that will help continue the really valuable input we get from the students who advise us. So thank you.
Thank you. I would certainly reflect those comments. Other comments today?
I support this as well and have been in the loop and heard concerns from both ends, and I think it was a robust discussion, and hopefully the value of some of these requirements will be seen on both ends of the spectrum. So I think it's a good move.
Thank you, Regent Omari. Final comments? Is there a motion to approve the policy?
Move approval.
Second.
There is a motion and second. Not hearing any further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion
Aye.
opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is the Board of Regents policy regarding namings. Proposed amendments to the namings policy adds language to guide consideration of namings involving regents or regents emeriti. The proposed changes are twofold. Number one, establish that buildings and other significant university assets may be named in honor of a regent emeritus no sooner than 1 year following service on the board. Sitting regents would not be eligible for honorary namings. Two, sitting regents and regents emeriti would, however, be eligible for namings associated with significant gifts to the university. In both instances, a special committee would consider such namings and forward the recommendations to the Board of Regents for final action. This policy is before us for review today and will come back to the board for final consideration in May. Before I open the floor for discussion, I do note my expectation that honorary namings involving former regents would be rare. I hope that goes without a lot of discussion. We serve in these roles because we love and support the university, not for individual recognition, obviously. That being said, service as a regent should not disqualify someone from being considered for this honor necessarily. I have asked staff to develop some minor modifications to policy before our next meeting, signaling the exceptional nature of honorary namings for former regents. I would accept some, I'll open this topic up for conversation now. Regent Simmons.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. You expressed some of my sentiments, but I'll probably state them a little more strongly. I think naming buildings for regents should be a rare or never event. The honor is in serving. We are public servants, and I think it should be an exceptional and maybe a never event to name something for regents. I believe this language is highly permissive of naming. It provides a pathway, and it will set some expectation. And I believe it will be a slippery slope where it will become difficult to not name something for regents in the future. I believe it puts faculty in an awkward position. I believe it puts sitting regents in an awkward position to name something for a former colleague. I would prefer to see language that made this more exclusionary.
Thank you, Regent Simmons. Regent Frobenius.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I have some similar concerns, and as I read this, I had one question. I mean, why? What's the history of why this policy is being developed, and why is it needed? It strikes me that once it's in the book, regardless of what form it takes, it does start to create some expectation, and some of our Type A colleagues might choose to say, this is my new target in life, and it's healthy.
I'll ask Executive Director Steves to provide some background on the process that has been underway on this matter.
It really stemmed from a question that was raised about a naming, and there was really no guidance in board policy as to whether it was a permitted activity or not a permitted activity, whether it needed to go through a board approval or another pathway. And so right now board policy is silent on the matter, and so the suggestion was that there was a gap that needed to be addressed in board policy.
Regent Allen and then Regent.
I think it's interesting. We're sitting in a building right now which is named after a regent, as a matter of fact, but for other reasons, including the gift. But I have some of the same sentiments that have been expressed, but I do have a kind of a technical question. Even if we don't agree with that full resolution, do we need to be sure that the policy doesn't preclude someone who, maybe a former governor or some other case, becomes a regent and then is ineligible to have their name in because they were a regent? So there may be some room for changing that. Other than that, I do have some of the same reservations that have been expressed already.
We're going to take these comments in, and the chair and staff will, and as we indicated in the report, will be revising some language anyway, and so we'll answer the question in the course of that modification. Regent Cohen?
Yes, and I agree with my colleagues. I would hope that the policy would be highly, highly exclusionary, just because of expectations and I think difficult situations for sitting regents. So I have some reservations about the policy also.
Thank you, Regent Cohen. Regent Simmons, and then Regent Devine.
Thank you. I do think it's reasonable to have policy language about this so that the question can be answered consistently and with authority. And I would prefer language that was exclusionary. There can be exceptions to policy, and I share with Regent Allen the sentiment there are individuals who have a very different role with the university at some point in their lives, and you wouldn't want to penalize that. However, I think those should be extraordinary exceptions and could be handled as an exception to policy.
Thank you. Regent Devine.
I agree with what everybody on the board has said so far, and I would think the other thing that might be helpful is to do a little summary of past. We do have some governors that have got buildings or things that are named after them right now that have also served as regents, and so before we do this, we should maybe look at what is the precedent that's been set in the past, and then that should be reflected in the comments that we make going forward or any revisions in the proposed policy.
Thank you. That'll be noted as well. Other comments? Regent Broad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just an additional comment on top. I'd like to have us consider a different number. 1 year seems to be a pretty quick turnaround. So as we're looking at a more exclusionary policy, I think we should lengthen that period of time in the revolving door.
Thank you. Final comments. This feedback, obviously, it's been very helpful. I think we can develop some language around which the board can find a consensus, and we will we'll work to do that for the next board meeting or shortly thereafter. Thank you, colleagues. Next, I'd like to move to an update on the strategic planning project, and Provost Hanson. Good morning, and President Kaler, would you like to introduce the topic as the presenters are assembling?
Thank you, Chair Beeson. As I said in my State of the University speech earlier this month, the strategic planning process is heading in a bold, relevant, and frankly, an invigorating direction. It's shaping up to be a plan that will enhance our critical thinking, will engage our learning and cutting-edge research that our graduates and their future employers are seeking. I'm very pleased to turn this over to Provost Hanson, who has been leading this effort extremely ably, and she'll provide a summary of planning to date, overview of our 4 goal areas, and a preview of next steps. Provost Hanson.
Provost Hanson.
Thank you, President Kaler, Chair Beeson, and members of the board. I do appreciate this opportunity to provide you with an update about progress in the strategic planning work group has made since our last reported to the board on this matter in December. We were grateful to have your comments and reactions at that time, and you'll see some of that discussion reflected in changes to our foundational language, which I'll share shortly. I'll spend a majority of my time with you today providing an overview of what we've identified as strategic goals. And I also want to give you a sense of our timetable for the rest of this effort and a sketch of our next steps. We planned again to reserve most of the time today for questions and discussion, but I also invited 2 faculty members from the 30-member Strategic Planning Work Group, so you can hear from someone besides me, and so they can give you their own particular perspectives on this process. I asked them yesterday if they would come to the meeting to speak informally about our work together and spend a few minutes telling you about what they find particularly exciting about our strategic planning deliberations and goals. They are Professor Ruben Harris, Department of Biochemistry, Molecular Biology, and Biophysics, and Professor Joe Constant, Department of Computer Science and Engineering. As a reminder, we're not changing our mission statement, which was last amended by the Board of Regents in 2008. The threefold mission of research and discovery, teaching and learning, and outreach and public service remains our mission, as approved by you, and we're proud of it. Our strategic planning is structured by this mission. The last time, I presented you with an account of the foundational commitments and guiding principles that ground and order our operations, not just this planning process, but the basic fulfillment of the university's mission. The work group wanted to articulate these commitments and principles as part of this specific process, however, so that we would remain ever mindful of our highest aspirations and constitutive standards. Thus, our foundational commitments and our guiding principles, specifying how those commitments inform and shape our action. Our mission and values, as well as the various internal and external conversations we've had to date, which have been extensive and have included numerous students, faculty, and staff, the University of Minnesota Foundation, the University of Minnesota Alumni Association boards, and a number of key external stakeholders, have all informed the current vision statement, which I want to read because I hope you will hear a number of changes from the last version that were specifically a product of our December discussion with the board. University of Minnesota Twin Cities will be preeminent in solving the grand challenges of a diverse and changing world. In pursuit of this vision, we will use our depth and breadth to capitalize on our exceptional students, faculty, staff, and on our location in a vibrant metropolitan setting to generate and disseminate new knowledge and insights. Create an educated populace able to identify, understand, and solve demanding problems. Leverage the power of divergent paths to knowledge and creativity in order to address grand challenges. And partner with the communities and people of the state of Minnesota to benefit the common good. As you'll see, the underlying this vision statement are four key continuing motifs. One that's bold and aspirational, announcing our desire to be preeminent. One that underlines our special responsibilities to Minnesota. One that positions our bold aspirations in the context of our broad range and depth. And one that recognizes the power of mutual engagement and partnership. These are the elements that shape our sense that we have the ability, and indeed a special responsibility, to tackle what we're calling the grand challenges of our diverse and changing world. The second part of the vision statement, in fact, articulates how we will pursue our overall vision, capitalizing on our breadth and depth, our unique location, at once urban metropolitan, extending to the rural areas of Minnesota, statewide. Our recognition of the value of a range of perspectives, and our commitment to a renewed land-grant mission. So, how will we get to this vision? The work group has identified 4 goal areas that they would like to pursue. President Kaler briefly discussed these in his State of the University address and sketched what pursuit of these goals might mean for our students and our community. First, build an exceptional university where grand societal challenges are addressed. What we're talking about here are curricular innovations, among other things, particularly at the undergraduate level, which we would provide for students in a new way. There's been much talk nationally about a T-shaped curriculum, where people get a broad sense of a variety of disciplines' contribution to something that they also are learning about in depth. We're interested in exploring that. We're interested in seeing how we can leverage intercollegiate options for education for our students so that they learn disciplines, but they also learn cross-disciplinary approaches to solving the world's problems. There will be administrative tasks associated with constructing these kinds of curriculums and providing information about them to our students, and there will be new opportunities for students if we succeed at this. This first goal of building this exceptional university involves both our teaching and learning and our research mission, however. MnDrive is one example of our beginning to position ourselves to address the grand challenges, and we are looking for more tools to connect our researchers across this institution and then in larger projects across many institutions. This is a place where the role of faculty and graduate students will be enhanced, transformed. The second goal, support excellence and with intention, reject complacency. We know that this university, as all institutions of higher education, is set right now in a rapidly changing environment. We are, as President Kaler has indicated, embarked on picking up the pace. There's institutional change that's happening right now. This underscores that and urges us on. OpEx is one of the elements of our rejecting complacency, and as President Kaler has reported, he's making great strides there. We also want to encourage all of the members of our university community to engage in experimentation, to allow sometimes for some failure when experiments are undertaken. But we want to make sure that everyone who is part of our university understands that for this university, good enough is never good enough. Establish a culture of reciprocal engagement. We've gotten rid of the culture of permeability phrase, which people weren't too fond of, I think, here the last time. Capitalizing on our unique location. We want to leverage our location, as President Kaler remarked in his State of the University address. We're talking here about partnerships with business and industry, with our schools, with government, and with the various communities in which we find ourselves and to which we reach out. We want to find opportunities there for student engagement and service learning. We want engaged research. We want to respect our partners, and we want to expect mutual benefit from our engagement. Not just financial benefit, but increased knowledge, results, satisfaction with our interactions, better education for our students. Aggressively recruit, retain, and promote field-shaping researchers and teachers. That really speaks for itself, but it's important to us that we're using the word field-shaping there. Those who define the way others in these areas will work, the questions they'll pursue. What we're encapsulating with this goal is that we have the highest aspirations for our faculty, both as teachers and researchers. This is a little graphic display of how we're managing the process of strategic planning and where we are at the moment. I've given you the 4 goals as we've so far articulated them. Today we invite your comments, questions, and reactions about that. The President and I think it's fair to say the deans and others with whom we've previewed these preliminary goals, are really excited about the direction in which we're heading, and we hope you are too. The next presentation for today will be coming from CFANS, and you'll see in a way how one of our very important colleges has already embraced the idea of the grand challenge. What we're engaged in, though, in this year-long process of articulating a strategic plan remains an iterative process. We welcome your thoughts and comments today as we continue our work, and we will repeatedly invite additional input and comment from across the campus and from our communities. The timeline shows you where we are currently in the process. The next time you see us will be in September, and as you can see from this slide, we have some work to do between now and then. So what we're doing to take the next steps in that work is putting together some action plans and some groups that will be working on those action plans. These will be teams, and right now we're going to broaden out the work of planning beyond the initial 30-member work group. People will be working under the guidance of co-chairs drawn from the work group on the issues aligned with the goals that we've outlined here today. We want to ensure that the action teams are representative of the larger university community with faculty, staff, and students on all teams. This is how we're going to build out the issue teams. even though you won't see an issue group that says student, let me assure you that the plan will be all about students, not only in the matter of curriculum, but in our expectations about engagement, teaching, and learning, and the research enterprise. Each issue team, as I say, co-chaired by work group members, but broadened to include many others, will be charged with the tasks that you see here. And after each team completes its work, the broader strategic planning work group will reconvene to make sure that the plans are appropriately woven together, and thus to complete the larger strategic plan that we hope to have ready for you in September. During this time, we will, as a university, also align components of recent strategic plans from the colleges and college-wide units, campus-wide units, including research, undergraduate education, graduate education, the international affairs, equity and diversity, public engagement. This is an important feature of this strategic planning. Every college, every unit has things it wants to do to be the best it can be at the things it does. And so there's kind of continuous strategic planning of that sort, and the units I mentioned have just created strategic plans. Much of what they do is related to what they are, but they also want to align with the overall strategic plan for the university. So we've sometimes used the analogy of the ship of Theseus, of rebuilding the ship while it's at sea, and it continues to be seaworthy, and it's getting better all the time. So part of the work of the summer will also be in aligning these plans, finding the places where they fit the elements that have emerged in the university, the Twin Cities campus strategic planning. We want to recognize the exceptional opportunities and strategic assets that differentiate us from other higher education institutions, and use the plan to help us seize those opportunities and leverage those assets. So now, before opening up the conversation for questions, I'd like to invite Professor Ruben Harris and Professor Joe Constant to introduce themselves more fully, say a bit about their own work, and then I'd ask them to comment briefly from their own perspectives on our strategic planning. So, Professor Harris.
Okay, good morning. So it's a real pleasure to be here.
For the record, just identify your name again and your
So I'm Ruben Harris. I'm a professor of biochemistry, molecular biology, and biophysics. Speaker Beeson, Regents, it's a pleasure. So I wanted to first maybe mention a little bit about my research. So I work on mechanisms of mutation in cancer and virus evolution. Maybe some of you saw a video last year that the university, the UMF, put together and highlighted some of the work, and part of the video depicted a woman winning her battle with breast cancer. And so it's exciting to be a part of this process. I was a little bit skeptical initially, wondering what a single scientist in a department of biochemistry could contribute. But I'm beginning to see how our research and my perspectives as a researcher might help. So in terms of this grand plan, we have a vision in that we have grand challenges to address. And to support those grand challenges, we have multiple goals. And two of those I'm really excited about. One of them is aggressively recruiting and retaining and promoting field-shaping researchers. And Provost Hansen mentioned the phrase field shaping. A synonym to that is, these are true leaders of their areas, and they lead, they motivate, and they define others to do exceptional things. So I'm excited about that as a researcher. I'm also kind of hand in hand with that very excited about supporting excellence and motivating excellence and promoting the greater good from a research perspective and also from a teaching perspective. And I think a part of that is also rejecting complacency and promoting an environment where it's just not okay to be okay. To really strive for something more. It may not always happen. We fail all the time. Every day in the lab, we probably have 90% failure, 10% success. But when that big leap is made, it's well worth the invested efforts. So, thank you again.
Professor?
Yes, Chair Beeson, members of the board, Joseph Constant, I'm Distinguished McKnight Professor and Distinguished University Teaching Professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering and the College of Science and Engineering.
My own area of specialty is human-computer interaction, and more specifically, social computing. I work in developing technologies that support new ways of people interacting with each other, and in studying how the design of these technologies affects both user experience and, perhaps more important in many of these cases, user behavior. I've been a member of the faculty here. This is my 22nd year. This is very much my professional home, and I've had some wonderful experiences here, from starting a company based on the technology that we developed here on recommender systems to just this past year teaching a massive online course that enrolled over 28,000 students worldwide, and spreading the work we've done and collected in that area of recommender systems around the world. I feel really privileged to have been invited to be part of this strategic planning effort, though I have to admit I was very much a skeptic at first. I'm a skeptic of strategic planning in general, and I was willing to put the effort in, but I was afraid we would come away with something that was fairly generic, like excellence and responsibility, whatever that means. Fortunately, we were charged from the very beginning. I remember President Kaler coming in and saying, you may not get away with copying somebody else's strategic plan and changing the name to University of Minnesota. We were charged with coming up with something that reflects what makes this university different and special. And I feel we've done that. And there are two things that really excite me about where we've come so far. One of these is this organizing concept of grand challenges or grand societal challenges. On the one hand, this reflects our three-part mission in weaving those pieces of research, education, and outreach together, but it also reflects our unique advantages. This is about bringing together the diverse areas of strength that we have in a distinctively comprehensive university that allows us to draw across many different fields of expertise. And perhaps most important, it changes the focus from success as simply measuring that you've continued to advance to success as being measured by the impact that we have in the work that we do, the impact we have on knowledge and culture, the impact we have on our state and on the world. And when we think about huge problems, I'll use the example of clean water supply. We can engage faculty and students from across this great campus, from fields like engineering to law to history to public health, agriculture, landscape architecture, computer science, philosophy, psychology, plant biology, and I stopped writing at 10 because I thought this would get long. But every one of those has something to say about how people organize themselves and how the science and the engineering work to make it possible to serve a growing population with what is unfortunately sometimes a dwindling supply of clean water. By rallying around such challenges, we also provide tomorrow's graduates with the preparation for challenging interdisciplinary problems that they will undoubtedly be forced to face and solve in the future, challenges we don't yet know, but they will face. And we highlight in that process much more concretely than we can otherwise the importance of having solid grounding in core disciplines from which you build and leverage this knowledge into interdisciplinary explorations. Since President Kaler did not talk about sports, I'll use a basketball analogy because it's the right time of year. Nobody builds a successful basketball program without players who master, fundamentals like passing and free throw shooting, but it's the challenge of coming together to win a tournament or maybe next year a national championship that really challenges the individuals to become even better passers and free throw shooters, and perhaps as important, to learn how to take those individual skills and work together as a team to come up with something that is a collective success that's larger than they could achieve individually. Second, I'm very excited about the strong statement we're making about our value to the Twin Cities and to the state, and as important about the value that we can bring in from the Twin Cities and the state. Our commitment to deeper engagement is another way of focusing on impact. When we talk about making it easier to connect with surrounding communities in the state, we're talking about partly paying dividends to our state with the benefits of our scholarship, making the things we discover here turn into value for the people who support us and the people we both educate and collaborate with. But we're also talking at the same time that when we invite those people to collaborate with us, we magnify our own ability to explore the next frontiers of knowledge and creativity. So in the interest of keeping your attention and respect, I will not use another basketball analogy, but just end here. Thank you.
Thank you. Provost Hanson, any final comments?
Thank you, Chair Beeson and members of the board. To close, I'd like to add something that, for 160 years, Minnesotans in the world have looked to the University of Minnesota to help them overcome our greatest challenges in agriculture. We think of yesterday's, of the board's visit to the Borlaug celebration and to your time in the Academic Health Center. The Minnesotans in the world have looked to the University of Minnesota to help us respond to challenges in agriculture, medicine, industry, business, public policy, quality of life, and much more. But the world around us has become more complex, and the challenges we face become even more complicated and interconnected. So the university's work must also evolve. We can't rest on our laurels. We've got to be a team. And we're setting a path to be the preeminent land-grant institution that can meet these challenges of the diverse and changing world we're in. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost Hanson, presenters, and other faculty and staff that have been working on this project so diligently over the past number of months. I'd like to open this up for discussion with my colleagues on the board. Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair Beeson, Provost Hanson, and professors. This is exciting, very exciting. It's coming a long way, and obviously we have a lot more to do. I'm curious to know, so I know we've done a great job of going out and getting multiple perspectives and inputs across the university and even beyond. Would you talk a little bit about what the teams would look like as far as, are these 20-person teams? Are these 10-person teams? Students, staff? How do we involve as many people without bringing in too many people on these individual teams, and what does that look like? Please.
Provost Hanson.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. Thank you, Regent Omari, and members of the board. Our last meeting on Monday actually ended with the point where we figured out how the teams were going to work, and I actually think the answer may vary a little bit from team to team. All of the teams will have faculty, staff, and students on them, but they may be bigger and they may ramify a little because in some cases, we will need to bring in people who have administrative responsibilities in particular areas to provide some sense of the structure within which we're operating as we bring in a better sense of the goals we want to pursue through those structures, perhaps change some of those structures. In general, though, we're thinking of 10 to 15 people per team.
Great, thank you.
Regent Broad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Provost Hanson. I really appreciate the update, and I think you remember that last time I had a concern about the rural nature and making sure that we were connected on the rural side and not just talking about the Twin Cities, and I just wanted to congratulate you. I think that you really have elevated that from what I've seen in these documents, and it sounds like you're elevating the entire statewide nature of this strategic plan, and I wanted to congratulate you on moving in that direction. The other thing is I really am thrilled to see the challenge to complacency. The okay is not okay. It reminds me of my mother's greatest philosopher that she loved named Yoda, and who always said, there is no try, there's just do. And I feel like this has a little bit of that in it. There is no try, there's just do. And I think the challenge to complacency for this university and for higher education in general is really a needed challenge. And I'm really glad to see us leading in that challenge toward complacency, because complacency just simply doesn't work anymore. So I congratulate you on that. And then also I just wanted to point out and make sure in our conversations over diversity and inclusion that we are considering not just the diversity of people and the diversity of experience and diversity of worldview, but that we're also making sure that we're elevating the need for the diversity of thought, and elevating that diversity of thought and the need for the diversity of thought, not just on behalf of our staff and on behalf of the professors, on behalf of all the people who are working at this great place, but also making sure that we're encouraging and amplifying the diversity of thought that we have for our students. And so I just wanted to make sure that the diversity of thought is included in that conversation. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Broad. Regent Allen.
Thank you very much for the good work. We really look forward to the final results of it. I have a process question. I realize this is a strategic plan for the Twin City campus, but do we have adequate process in place to recognize the resources we have on the coordinate campuses and take advantage of those in putting together this plan? And secondly, how do we avoid any, or at least discuss and solve any unintended competitions we may create for the other campuses when we do one for this? And I would ask the same questions if Duluth were doing a plan or anyone else. So it's just a process question. How do we help ourselves best as a system by this strategic plan?
Provost Hanson or President Kaler?
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I'll take that, although the Provost is fully capable of providing this answer. This is a Twin Cities plan, and we developed that in that way because planning across the system from the ground up would be cumbersome and logistically and perhaps conceptually challenging. Each of the system campuses has in place or is developing a strategic plan. And so when this one is finished for the Twin Cities, we will then convene a system-wide conversation about alignment between those strategic plans with purposeful work around obviously eliminating duplications, but also developing the synergies and the leverages that we can use. And there are easily a handful ideas top of mind that would enable, that would benefit from leveraging those resources. So that's sort of a next step, if you will.
Thank you.
Chair Beeson.
Regent McMillan.
Thank you, and I appreciated Regent Allen's question and Regent Broad's comment about this picking up a more rural focus, and then you just clarifying, President Kaler, that each campus does have its own plan, as Chancellor Black put one together after he arrived. There's a little confusion, I think, in the community about that. At least I end up answering some questions, not from Chancellor Black's team, but more from community members. Well, where's our plan? And then you got to remind them, well, that we have one. And I'm very thrilled to hear that we're going to pull it all together afterward in appropriate time. So that's great. Question for Provost Hanson. How do we, and maybe President Kaler and perhaps the professor there, how do we go forward and link a plan that is properly based around grand challenges that are in many cases just global in nature and global in scope, and honor our land grant heritage and everything about that, whether it's agriculture, minerals, forests, water, whatever, honor that, and also make sure that we're not limiting our scope, our vision, our opportunity. I see land grants showing up in, I think it's goal 3B, and I heard it mentioned several times in the comments this morning, but I think we have a duty to help the state solve those, but I can understand there's some natural friction when it comes to tackling problems that are global in nature. So can you provide a little sense of how we're going to stay focused on land grant type problems that Minnesota brings while we get global in nature with these grand challenges?
Provost Hanson.
Chair Beeson, Regent McMillan, members of the board, thank you for that question. Part of what we see ourselves doing in working through these action groups is redefining what the land grant mission means in a world which is flatter, smaller, but full of bigger problems. Many of the things that we see as issues that we are particularly well positioned to address because they press on the state of Minnesota are ones that are connected with problems elsewhere in the world. Even though we will be preeminent in solving these grand challenges. We will not take on every grand challenge in the world at the outset. We will have a process for delineating those that we will focus on through various periods of time. And many of these issues, resource management and water and feeding the world, are ones where we are already among the leaders in the world, but what we have to recognize is that the problems that we deal with as Minnesotans are ones that have an impact on the rest of the world and where the rest of the world has an impact on us. So I don't see this as in any way, with its global engagement, diminishing our local and state engagement. I hope that's an answer.
President Kaler would like
It is, and Chair Beeson, just a really short follow-up. That is
Mellon.
exactly what I was hoping you'd say, and I think what we can do as a university is just publicize the fact that when we tackle a problem, whether it's in sub-Saharan Africa, and finding the link to what's going on in Minnesota here is so helpful and brings our stakeholders along with us. We're solving Minnesota's problems and the world, and thank you.
President Kaler would like to add
I would
the conversation.
Thank you, Chair Beeson and members of the board. Just a coda to that, it's interesting that Abraham Lincoln did not use the word grand challenges in 1862 when he established land-grant institutions. But in fact, land-grant institutions were the solution to the grand challenge of that century, of educating people, of bringing the mechanical arts, of making the liberal arts available to the population of the United States. So these ideas of grand challenges, I think, are resonating very strongly with our land-grant route.
Regent Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. I don't have any question, really, but I have a couple comments. And I want to reiterate what a couple colleagues have said about use the words exciting and thrilling, because I share some of the professor's skepticism, having been involved in a lot of strategic plans about do strategic plans mean anything or go anywhere. So I have three thank yous. First of all, I want to thank the two professors, Professor Harris and Professor Constant, for being here, because to me it was so helpful to hear your very articulate perspectives and to hear your initial skepticism and then how you have really worked through the process. So I want to thank both of you for being here and expressing your points of view. It's very helpful. I want to applaud President Kaler once again for saying that the usual excellence is just not going to cut it for a strategic plan. And I think that you have really articulated something that is distinctive and really important. And third, I want to thank you, Provost Hanson, and your committee for all the enormously hard work that you're doing and you will do, because I do think that you're really coming up something that will be alive and workable for our university and really be crucial. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Cohen. Regent Devine.
I too would like to just reiterate what much of the board has already expressed here in terms of this process. And as I look at the forward chart here, it obviously is pleasing to see that we've proceeded about halfway through the process. And looking at the next couple of phases particularly, I look at that with great excitement in terms of what the eventual outcomes will be. The sense of deeper engagement and that the processes of identifying deeper visions and global responsibilities and interconnectedness within the state are all very, very important pieces that I think there's been a great deal of discussion amongst the board here and carrying forward. If you would, one of when I look at the five groups that are going forward, I look then to the chart going forward with the plan, alignment, and the feedback components. Could you share with us a little bit about how the student feedback will be generated, in this process, in that phase, in the May through August phase before it comes back to us? Because, of course, I've got great interest in terms of what the student-centered outcome pieces of this report will be in terms of how it comes back to us. Thank you.
Chair Beeson and Regent Devine. members of the board. It's one of the reasons that we pushed up our timeline a little so that we could grab the students who are on campus right now to start working on these issue groups while the spring term is still in session. And there will be students on the teams, and we actually hope that many of them will be willing to continue their work throughout the summer with the teams. And then, as we bring this back together, before we bring it to you in September, we will be connecting again with a more finished product to get a broader range of opinion. And we can communicate with the students in a variety of ways, electronically, even when some of them aren't here.
Thank you, Provost. Other comments? I'd like to echo all the comments my colleagues have made. I'd also make note that anytime a plan can build on its predecessor, and I go to the mission that you alluded to this, Provost Hanson, that the mission that you've outlined here is really the same one that was constructed about a dozen years ago, and I think it's an affirmation for the board members who were here when that strategic plan was done and other staff that was here before, that they got that right, that teaching and learning and research, discovery and outreach and public service are the right focus areas, the three-part mission that that have really been institutionalized with the university. So I'm pleased to see that that is there. And again, thank you, and this will be coming back to the board in September for final consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Provost, you're going to stay
just for a minute
as you assemble the next group. This is an exciting presentation as well, and builds on yesterday's celebration with Dr. Borlaug. And we're going to be talking about trends in higher education, food, and agricultural programs. Take a moment here as the presenters assemble. Big talk. Provost, if you would, is there sitting, if you would be able to introduce the panelists here for this
Chair Beeson
presentation.
and members of the board, I am pleased to introduce Brian Boer, Interim Dean of the College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resource Sciences and Director of the Minnesota Agricultural Experiment Station. As you'll see through today's presentation, led by Dean Boer, the work of CFANS aligns with the direction of the work so far completed on our university strategic planning, and will show, in part, why we're so well positioned to fulfill the bold mission articulated there. So with details, I will leave the table and leave this to the experts.
Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Provost Hanson.
Interim Dean Boer.
Chair Beeson, members of the board, President Kaler, thank you for inviting us to present this. We are indeed, and especially after the strategic planning presentation, indeed excited to be part of this panel today, because I think we're just generally excited from yesterday, and this week has been a tremendous week to recognize agriculture and food and the impact it's had globally, and I'll talk quite a bit about that. I am, as Provost Hanson said, I am currently Interim Dean of CFANS and Director of the Minnesota Agricultural Experiment Station as well. With me today, I brought some guests along, some faculty as well as external people, to visit a bit about some of their activities related to agriculture. So we have Jim Burdine, who's the head of plant pathology, sitting directly next to me. Dr. Gabe Gismeni, who's with PepsiCo. We're working with a public-private partnership that extends that engagement from the university to industry and working closely with them. Dr. Rebecca Masterman, who works with Bee Squad and is heavily engaged with Dr. Marla Spivak on bee colony collapse research, as well as engagement with the community on how do we promote beekeeping and pollinators in the environment. And then Dr. Mike Reed from the West Central Regional Outreach Center out in Morris, Minnesota, somewhat indicating our presence out in Minnesota that we've had for many years in our experiment stations originally, but now regional outreach centers that impact every part of the state, both geographically and in the research they do. I'll start off with directly our grand challenge. And as President Kaler said, that grand challenge, even though it wasn't used 150 years ago, came out of the land grant mission, and we are part of that land grant mission. And one of the things, to read through this, our challenge is big, and it's complicated, and it's going to be here for a while, we believe, but I think we do have solutions for it. So this may sound gloom and doom as I go through this, but in fact, I think we've never been positioned better between the biological sciences, the engineering sciences, and how we address robotics, informatics, technologies coming to agriculture, the mechanics and agricultural side of the land grant piece. We've never been better positioned to address some of these if we recognize them and work aggressively towards solving those problems. So we're trying to provide food, fiber, bioenergy, bioproducts, and ecosystem services to expanding populations and economies while, and these are important words, while sustaining productivity, our natural resources, and advancing civil, just, and prosperous society. And that sounds a lot like Dr. Borlaug's, as we were celebrating his accomplishment yesterday, a lot like some of the words he'd written over time. And so that remains as relevant today as it was then. And though he's credited with saving billions of lives, in some ways we've grown complacent about that. So 2008, 2007, if you remember the high food prices that occurred, and recall we actually did have food riots in some countries, both urban and rural areas. Part of that was due to trade rather than pure food supplies. But we grew complacent about our ability to feed the world and resting on the laurels, essentially, of Dr. Borlaug and others who had advanced that mission. The other side of that coin now that it makes our challenge greater is we're now recognizing that, and some people argue that actually as a result of the Green Revolution, we have implications on our environment, on our biodiversity issues, more broadly with forestry and wetlands coming into production relative to being a natural habitat and providing those services. So not only are we now looking at how do we advance those food supply issues, but CFANS in general is well positioned to look at how are we going to address that issue of providing food to a growing economy, to growing populations. At the same time, we're preserving those natural resources. And so our challenge is twofold, and we're dedicated and ready to try and achieve that goal. We're complex. So a lot of the strategic planning was about the complex problems. And CFANS actually, as I thought about this, is really an ecology of solutions around this. And I'm going to just work through this slide a little bit. At the center of this, and I think this is critical to recognize because we often talk, and in fact in CFANS we talk a lot about biological sciences, genomics, genetics, advancements in food and production, but really we have extraordinary capabilities in the physical science as well. Bioproducts engineering is the side of that makes that perhaps the most clear, but the issues arising in climate change, in water, resources, in soils are all related to physics, hydrology, geology, and some of those things are coming from the College of Science and Engineering. So right in the center of this, we recognize that we have linkages to solve these problems into our core colleges across the university. And a little bit later, I'll talk about the social aspect of this. That's why these words of social justice and civil societies come up. And as I'll rephrase Dr. Borlaug again, that without food, it's almost impossible to have justice in civil societies. And we also have people working in those areas on economics as well as policy and culture as well. The other area around that are applied science areas, of course, in CFANS, that we are dedicated to this notion of bringing that research, those core research areas out to people in the field, so that land grant piece. And I'll just point out that this year is the 100th anniversary of extension, which was not originally the land grant had outreach in it, but formally codified in an Extension Act that related to charge the universities with providing services out into rural communities, to farmers, but also an education component to households and communities in their development processes. So we have had a long tradition of being very active and engaging with Minnesotans and trying to bring that out, our research out into the field. If you go beyond that sphere, we have this interesting element where we work in, and I'll call it, for lack of a better term, the built environment, which is really the agribusinesses, the communities, the urban environments, those places where we actually, I think of it as the manicured, if you drive in southern Minnesota, you see the manicured soybean fields and cornfields, rows geopositioned to go exactly straight down that field as compared to the boundary waters, which are not, our natural habitat. They're not a built environment. So we work very broadly across that built environment with people within that, and as with Gabe here representing some of our private partnerships, those relationships extend across the globe, really. And then a circle around that is our natural environment, that inherently we're recognizing that impact that we have in the natural environment, our forests, our wetlands, wildlife, climate. And beyond that is this global issue of the solutions we're trying to provide and the challenges we face in those balls around that, which are many, and mostly related to how we work across the landscape and how we interact with that. The analogy I like to use is sometimes, if maybe you may be familiar with Cedar Creek, it's a preserved native area that has been shown to have extraordinary productivity from its diversity of biomass, diversity of grasslands, wetlands, and so we look at our colleges being incredibly productive and providing that same thing and resting on diversity. We have a diverse culture with regard to the work we do. We have a diverse culture represented within our student populations, and we're trying to expand that to expand our ecological system as well and improve that impact. I want to talk through a few of our key areas that we view as imperatives, really, so as part of this challenge, and there's really 4 of them that I'll go through. And I won't talk about much solutions today, but the key imperative, of course, is sustaining productivity in agriculture. And that's slightly different, that phrase is important, than sustainable agriculture. Sustainable agriculture is sort of that complacency piece, that at some level we'll find a spot in the world where we've hit it, and now we can basically rest back and say we're sustainable. What we in fact see is, and it's sort of the evolutionary nature of the world, that we're all familiar with Darwin's theories, but of course as we've put selection pressures on our land, our ecosystems, our biological systems, we're finding that the evolutionary aspects of both the biological side, but now we're finding, of course, with climate change issues, we find it with water quality issues and water availability issues. The physical world also is evolving and adapting, maybe not in the wrong direction, which is depleting resources, but we're having to adapt our systems and how we think about feeding the world to those changes as well. So rather than being complacent, we absolutely have to find ways to sustain our productivity. And I have a couple of charts here. You couldn't do a presentation as economist without a couple of charts, right? So I had to throw those in as a token piece. But if you look at trends in crop productivity growth, and so we haven't, yields are still increasing, but those downward trends in that lower chart are clearly showing that across our major crops, maize, wheat, and rice are included here, the major staple foods, we're increasing at a rate now over the last 15 or so years that's about half the rate that we did during the height of the Green Revolution. And a good deal of that is due to some of these pressures from soil depletion, water issues, increase in pest disease pressures as some of those evolve. And then the key to that is we simply have not been making, and this is research done at the University of Minnesota here, we have not been making the critical R&D investments that we need to be able to sustain our productivity. And you can actually show that if you look at population trends, you look at economic growth, and you look at these trends in productivity that are increasing about 1.5% a year now, they simply don't add up. That we simply do not reach that point where we're going to be sustainable. We won't be able to sustain food systems if we don't increase our productivity. And that's where I'll just comment that MnDrive is so exciting because to get that new injection of investment, which is not included in our data here at Minnesota at least, that opportunity to make investments to shoot for those frontier edges of global food systems. And in CFANS in particular, we find it very appealing because, of course, we work across both the global food and agricultural side to the robotics and informatics pieces of the MnDrive initiative, because of course we're all about measuring, monitoring, and you see, if you go out and see the $350,000, $400,000 John Deere tractors rolling through the field, they're not just tilling now, they're collecting data on soil moisture, on yields, on crop conditions, on pests, on nutrient application fields. So that piece of that world is very important as well. So that's an exciting part of reinvestment. I'll also mention the bioremediation aspects because, of course, we do believe, and we have done this in time and shown it with research, that we can improve soil quality, we can improve tilth, we can improve fertility from the way we manage and practice our application on the land. The same thing with water. So we have many engagements across that. And so in general, we're very excited about the prospects for increasing productivity, but we have to make those investments and we have to do the research and engage the community and broader public in those activities as well. Our second area that is imperative, and I highlight "and" on that. Too often, and I'll give an example when I was at the legislature recently talking about a project working on a terrestrial invasive species. An example of where you might think there's biodiversity, something new moving into your habitat, but typically what they do is destroy native habitat. So you think of carp, you think of zebra mussels. In terrestrial species, you think of the emerald ash borer that's coming to our native trees. And so I was meeting with a legislator, and there was a hat on the desk that said "Bee Care" on it. And so I said, well, that seems like a good thing. We're concerned about bee collapse. You're advocating for that. He said, no, this is a bad thing. Well, why is that? Because the cap on the back of it, you couldn't see it, but it was a Bayer Crop Science logo. And her thing was Bayer creates neonicotinoids that are affecting, potentially hypothesized, I'll say, because it hasn't been shown yet, to affect bees and their ability to move across the landscape that's in crops that are, as well as urban landscapes, where a lot of your horticultural products are as well. And I pointed out again that this isn't an either-or proposition, that we can't simply say we're going to remove these agricultural practices, whether it's genetically modified seeds, whether it's neonicotinoids, pesticides, and save the bees. At the same time, we're reducing our productivity. So we have to have these "and" words in here, that it is productivity, feeding that secure world, and achieving sustainability in our natural habitat and biodiversity. Oh, sorry about that. Thank you, Jim. Oops. And so that's a key part of this aspect that we look at. And the challenge there that I think is exciting that we're overcoming is that we have a difficult time, if you look at the genomic side of it, we account for, talking to plant breeders and crop scientists, about 50% of the variability we see in our actual yields and productivity is explained by the genetics, genomics research, and our ability to alter those pathways. And the other 50% of variation comes within that biosphere of what happens outside of that. And we're starting through informatics and measuring some of these things that are happening in the field. We're becoming more able to address the correlations, feedback, selection pressure issues, random mutations, earth evolution's impacts on the productivity of our systems. So our ability to understand that allows us to be more productive in a diverse biological system, to work within that habitat and be more effective at it. I'll also mention beyond the food side of this, many of you may be familiar with the Before Warmed project, related to climate change, that our boreal forest runs through northern Minnesota, and Cloquet Center for Forestry is located right on the edge of that. And they're actually warming up the soils to try and see how the timber, the forests, and also the understory of the forests adapt to that warming. So we can try and determine what it does to our forest industry, but also what we'll do to our natural habitat as part of that, the change in the ecological systems. And a little bit later, Becky will talk a bit about bees and pollinators, and that's sort of one of those large, global aspects of how we see changes occurring. Our third area is renewable energy, climate, and water resources. And it moves us a bit towards more the physical science side of the world. We're doing climate change, moisture in the air, physical properties, chemistry, and so on that affects water quality and other aspects. We engage with it. The interaction between food and energy is strong. So if you look at biofuels recently, and of course ethanol's one of the more prominent versions of that, we know that the photosynthetic properties of plants has the hope that we'd be able to produce and sustain renewable fuels from that. But of course the energy conversions that happen there may not yet do that. And then the irony is, of course, our cropping systems and so on now rely very heavily on non-renewable fuels, on oil and petroleum, whether it's nitrogen for fertilizers or whether it's petroleum going into equipment and manufacturing and processing. And so we're looking very heavily at how do we address, it has implications for climate change, for non-renewable resources, and how do we in our agricultural and food systems both reduce our carbon footprint and yet provide the energy and inputs that we need to produce those crops, and perhaps cycle that back through. So an exciting area of research we're working on as well. And I can't go completely to the physical side, that if Morris, again, to bring up another research outreach center, has a wind project that's built around trying to develop both energy and crop inputs from wind. I kind of call it the magic of science in some ways. I'm not a chemist, so I don't understand exactly how the process works. That's why you bring a professor with you who does have a chemistry background. But it's actually generating nitrogen that can be used in fertilization of crops, the hope being that you can then generate perhaps liquid biofuels like ethanol more efficiently with fewer non-renewable resources, and at the same time producing hydrogen to fuel, whether the golf cart they have there already or other equipment. So another exciting prospect for how we're trying to get our food security advanced, as well as including reducing our impacts on climate, on water resources, on some of the non-renewables that we're challenged with. Finally, the piece that I think surprises many people is, and I get this question because I am an applied economist, so the fourth grand challenge is in the area of applied economics and ag, food, natural resource education. And I put this diagram up there I've done some research not too long ago on causes of famine And what you actually find is about 50% of famine since the turn of the century was largely based on droughts, the typical things, crop failures. About 50% of those were related to conflict and policy decisions. Of course, those were issues, for example, in China, in India, in Pakistan, and the regions of the world where they had some failed policies. But we know that we can't simply rely on technology as a solution to feed the world, that a huge potential for that relies in improved education, improved economic development. What we see when economies grow, as we look at the population numbers, is birth rates tend to decline. So if you look at the developed part of the world, if you look at the US, you look at Japan, you look at any country, South Korea, as they've developed, you see birth rates decline dramatically as there's less pressure on having more children to advance the household income and have people in the workforce. So we have to find ways in a policy context globally to improve economic outcomes, improve policies, and those include technical policies on investments in technology to advance the mission of our science side of the world. And I'll point out, at the University of Minnesota, we do have both sides of that coin. Of course, we've talked about Norman Borlaug. He eventually did become primarily a policy person working with governments to advance the varieties he'd achieved. But we have Vernon Rutan, who is a Regents professor here, and worked extensively globally to look at trade policies, growth and development policies in agriculture to advance those goals. We're working hard now on education. One of the things we'll be taking initiative on, the University of Minnesota has led with Access to Success, is to try and bring agriculture into context into science, the STEM fields in schools. So we just hired a new person who many of you may have met yesterday, LaJoy Spears, who's spearheading the Minnesota Youth Institute that's going to schools and trying to advance education in young people and get them excited. We had 3 young women speaking yesterday that did not come from agricultural backgrounds, who were excited about the prospect and challenge of feeding the world and finding the new technologies to do that. We're committed to working through ag education and other avenues to go into schools here in the cities. We've done this with economics already in the social science side, and bring that as an application to science programs in schools with the hope of capturing young students' imagination, getting them into universities, taking them out into the world, having them engage the world in solving those world food problems more broadly. With that, I leave with a quote that actually came from a paper that Jim Burdeen was a co-author on regarding using wild crop varieties to improve genetic advancement. But it's important to resolve complacency in this. You'd think it'd be an obvious thing that we need to feed people, but we seem to forget it occasionally. And I just love this quote because it was from an ecologist, that if we fail on food, we fail on everything. And so we're committed, we're excited about our prospects. The technologies are out there, the researchers we have here, the University of Minnesota's capacity, the community we're in has tremendous resources to address this. And with that, I'll turn it over to the faculty and others we brought with us, and begin with Jim Burdeen and Gabe Gissemi. Thank you.
Thank you, Interim Dean Buer. And
thank you.
Present yourself, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. I'm Jim Burdeen. I'm professor and head of the Department of Plant Pathology.
Good morning, Chair. I'm a member of the board. I'm Gabe Gusmini. I'm an R&D director in PepsiCo as part of the long-term research organization within the corporation.
Chair Beeson, members of the board, and President Kaler, I'm proud to present the Steakman-Borlaug Center for Sustainable Plant Health, the SBC. The Steakman-Borlaug Center is named to honor and build upon the legacy of 2 prominent CFANS plant pathologists, Eldon Steakman and Norman Borlaug. Within the Steakman-Borlaug Center, we pursue transformative educational activities and translational research that are aimed at enhancing global food security, improving ecosystem health, and bettering human lives. By its very nature, the Steakman-Borlaug Center is interdisciplinary, involving scientists from multiple fields of study, including plant pathology, entomology, soil science, plant breeding, and applied economics. The Steakman-Borlaug Center complements a second entity within CFANS known as INSTEP, the International Science, Technology, Practice, and Policy Center. And together, the Steakman-Borlaug Center and INSTEP partnership provide a multidisciplinary rapid response platform to crop pests and diseases. This partnership also enables local and global research and training opportunities and provides bioeconomic modeling expertise to guide global crop production investments and policy decisions. And this partnership between the Steakman-Borlaug Center and INSTEP is really something that's unique. It's not something we see at peer institutions. And this partnership is really geared towards positioning CFANS and the University of Minnesota as world leaders in global food security. Now, I'm going to present one specific project that we're pursuing within the Steakman-Borlaug Center, and this is in collaboration with INSTEP. This project highlights very nicely the importance of partnerships between the university and industry, and this work is a partnership with PepsiCo as well. This project deals with the genetic improvement of crop plants, and it is a research and workforce development project that is focused at the local level in the sense that the crops that we're studying in this project are important to the Minnesota economy. And these crops include potato, soybean, fruit crops such as apple, and wheat. But while the focus of this project is at the local or statewide level, you'll see that the impact of this work is actually global. Now, each of these crops exists in a complex environment and is faced with numerous different types of stresses that can negatively impact plant health. Fortunately, for each of these crops, there are gene bank collections of crop wild relatives, which are genetic treasure troves for adaptation of these plants to the changing global climate, expanding human population, and the ever-changing pests and diseases. The challenge in this project is to identify those rare, useful genes amongst those gene bank collections, and this is truly akin to identifying a needle in a haystack. But the University of Minnesota is ideally positioned to become a world leader in the application of high-throughput big data approaches to gene bank collections that'll have direct benefit to the Minnesota economy and global food security. And so, in short, this project, this partnership between the Steakman-Borlaug Center and PepsiCo aims to use high-throughput genomics and DNA sequencing approaches and novel informatics platforms that are developed here at the university to identify genes that are useful for crop improvement amongst these gene bank collections. Now, one very specific example of the research that we're pursuing deals with potato. And the images that you're seeing now highlight the importance of potato late blight disease. This disease can kill the plants in the field. It can also rot the tubers in storage. Now, this disease was the cause of the Irish potato famine. So in the 1840s, 1 million people starved to death because of this plant disease. Today, this disease results in an $8 billion worldwide cost. And this disease is particularly important in areas of the world with high population densities that face food insecurity issues. And worldwide, China, Russia, and India are number 1, 2, and 3 in potato production. Late blight is the number 1 production problem for potato in these countries. So on a global scale, this disease has been an important threat to global food security, and it remains so today. Now, fortunately, crop wild relatives of potato are good sources of disease-resistant genes. So this partnership between the Steakman-Borlaug Center and PepsiCo aims to use novel DNA sequencing strategies, genomics approaches, paired with informatics platforms developed within CFANS to make genes more accessible for potato improvement. And we're applying that same model to several other crops that are important in Minnesota, including soybean, fruit crops such as apple and wheat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Regent Beeson, members of the board. I'd like to introduce next Dr. Becky Masterman. She works with the bee squads and to talk about what's happening with our bee population, pollinators in general.
Welcome, Dr. Masterman.
Thank you, Chair Beeson, members of the board. I'm very happy to be here. I think the last time I saw many of you was on our turf at the Honey House. And my boss, actually, Professor Marla Spivak, would have been happy to be here also, but she is attending the thesis defense for one of her 7 graduate students. So I'd like to start by talking about the fact that since 2006, 1 of every 3 honeybee colonies dies over the winter in the United States, while at the same time, 1 of every 3 bites of food that we eat is benefited by bee pollination. We don't know what year 8 will look like. We'll find out in a couple of months when the reports start coming in as far as the number of bee colonies that did die. But we do know that this loss is unsustainable. We understand that the death of honeybee of honeybee colonies is not due to a single factor. In fact, we would love it if it was due to a single factor. It would make our life a lot easier. Instead, it's multiple interacting factors that are causing the problems with the honeybees, including pathogens, parasites, poor nutrition, and pesticides. So if a colony is not getting adequate nutrition, which we know is occurring throughout the United States, then that's going to impact their immune system, and they're not going to be able to handle the toxic chemicals when they come in contact with them when they're foraging. So if they're coming into contact with pesticides, their immune system isn't equipped to handle them. Now, we're able to monitor the honeybee colonies because we know that they're managed by beekeepers, but we don't know what's going on with the 350 or more bee species that we have in Minnesota. Because they're single bees or small colonies of bees, they live in stems or in the ground, and they really go unmonitored and unprotected. I like to say that with everything that Marla is doing in the Bee Lab, she's trying to solve this crisis on her own. She is directing research through her graduate students, and she's also started a very unique national program to help commercial beekeepers, because they're the ones who are helping with the bee pollination, where we're benefiting with the fruits and vegetables. If she wasn't doing enough to help the bees, she also took some of her MacArthur Genius Fellowship funds, and she founded the Bee Squad. I'm happy to be the coordinator for the Bee Squad. Marla realized that there is an amazing amount of public concern, and there is a lack of programs to help the public help bees. So when she founded the Bee Squad, the goal was to help people help bees. We're both helping beekeepers and the public. We mentor beekeepers, and you can see Marla in this slide with the group of new beekeepers. You can tell they're new because their bee suits are very clean, and they're standing a little bit away from the colony. This is one of the first sessions we had last year. You can also see Mrs. Kaler's colony to the left. The Bee Squad also has a program where we will provide information to people, and we will help them with planting for bees and with bee habitat, with information that we provide in presentations in the form of a brochure on our website that's very popular. And we have a third program called Hive to Bottle. And you see a picture of a Hive to Bottle client on this slide. It's the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. And our Hive to Bottle program is designed so that either families or organizations will buy honeybees and the equipment needed to maintain them, and then they hire the Bee Squad to maintain these bees. This program has involved many families and many organizations. I'd like to name a few of them. We have the Wiseman Art Museum. Thank you. With the Wiseman Art Museum, and I'm happy to report that the Wiseman bees did survive the winter. We also have Aveda as our client, Intelligent Nutrients, Saranda, an organic food supplier, and 2 country clubs, the Town and Country Club as well as the Somerset Country Club. And last year we even had a church congregation, Family of Christ in Chanhassen. This year we are doubling our business, and we're adding to the numbers of organizations that support bees. We call them bee ambassadors because if it's a family or if it's an organization and they have bees in their backyard or on their rooftop and they're not beekeepers, they need to answer some questions because the public, their customers, or their family, they're going to ask, and why are you doing this? And that conversation that is started in this program is really helping the effort to get the information out as far as why we need to help bees. I'd like to emphasize that the Bee Squad is a very small part of what the Bee Lab is doing, but Marla Spivak has gone above and beyond in helping this program thrive, using her own funds and her time and her energy. And I'd also like to emphasize that your support of our program and your support of the new bee research and teaching facility on the St. Paul campus is very much appreciated because it's really helping our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Interim Dean Buer.
Yes, Regent Beeson, members of the board, I'd like to introduce Dr. Mike Reese to talk about a project at West Central Research Outreach Center on wind generation for fertilizer and energy.
Thank you. Welcome.
Chair Beeson, Regents, and President Kaler. As Brian said, my name is Michael Reese, and I am the Renewable Energy Director at the West Central Research and Outreach Center in Morris. I'm here to address a grand challenge, the challenge to feed the world while sustaining the environment. In the spirit of this grand challenge, a team of researchers across the university are pursuing an elegant concept in which wind energy, water, and air are used to produce nitrogen fertilizer. Imagine a farmer standing in his or her field of corn or wheat underneath a spinning wind turbine. The energy generated from the wind is used to separate hydrogen from water. Nitrogen is pulled from the air. The hydrogen and nitrogen are then combined to form nitrogen fertilizer that nourishes the plants surrounding the farmer. The farmer may be standing in Minnesota or in another country such as Brazil, China, Nigeria, or Sweden. The world may have an astounding 10.9 billion people by 2050, according to the United Nations World Population Policies in 2013. Serious questions have been raised whether or not the Earth can handle significantly higher population levels, considering fundamental constraints in energy, food, and the environment. Our research addresses the nexus of these three constraints through the development of renewable and sustainably produced nitrogen fertilizers. Next to water, nitrogen fertilizer is the most limiting nutrient for food production. Minnesota farmers import over $400 million of nitrogen fertilizer each year and are subjected to volatile price swings. Furthermore, nitrogen fertilizer is currently produced using fossil energy, which contributes significantly to the carbon footprint of agricultural commodities. Global companies based in Minnesota, such as Cargill, General Mills, and Target, are working to reduce the carbon footprint of their products. Consumers are demanding these changes to agriculture, so agricultural producers will need clean energy technologies. In underdeveloped regions of the world, the challenges are different. Farmers have limited access to crop nutrients and carry sacks of nitrogen fertilizer on their backs to small field plots and provide food for their families and villages. Localized nitrogen fertilizer production will allow for more food productions in regions with high needs. A renewable hydrogen and ammonia pilot plant was formally dedicated in the summer of 2013 at the West Central Research and Outreach Center in Morris, as you can see here on these slides. The pilot plant uses a portion of the wind energy generated from a nearby wind turbine to drive the production of nitrogen fertilizer. The pilot plant is believed to be the first of its kind in the world. At this time, the pilot plant uses conventional Haber technology. However, technologies being developed in university labs have great potential to reduce the energy consumed and the cost of production. The ultimate goal is to commercialize renewable and sustainable fertilizer technologies for Minnesota companies as well as farmers across the state. Our transdisciplinary team is developing 3 novel nitrogen production technologies. The first technology is absorbent enhanced ammonia production. Professors Ed Kussler, Lanny Schmidt, and Alec McCormick in the Department of Chemical Engineering and Material Science have developed a new technology for ammonia production which can circumvent thermodynamic equilibrium and allow economical small-scale production. Based on results so far, it is possible to achieve greater than 85% conversion to ammonia in a single pass over the catalyst bed, much greater than the typical 20% achieved in large commercial plants today. Developed by Professor Roger Roon and his team in the Department of Bioproducts and Biosystems Engineering, the second technology is non-thermal plasma-assisted catalysis. A non-thermal plasma reactor can produce ammonia at a much lower temperature and pressure than the conventional Haber-Bosch ammonia synthesis process. Recently, technologies and techniques were developed which significantly improve the reaction and conversion efficiency. The third technology involves the use of hydrochar developed from biomass to directly capture plant nutrients such as nitrogen or ammonia either via a production process or as part of bioremediation methods. The nitrogen-enhanced hydrochar can then be used as a soil amendment. This technology is being developed by Professor Ken Valentis and his team within the Biotechnology Institute. Overall, these technologies need to be further developed, tested at pilot scale, and then evaluated with respect to their commercial, environmental, economic, and policy implications. To accomplish these objectives, our research team is developing a MnDRIVE transdisciplinary research grant application and pursuing other funding opportunities. Mankind has experienced grand challenges in the past and resolved the potential crisis through innovation. In the early 1900s, world population was outpacing global food supply. The supply of nitrogen of organic fertilizer did not allow for adequate food production until an efficient synthetic nitrogen fertilizer production process was commercialized by Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch. The Haber-Bosch process resulted in significant increases in food availability across the world and is still the basis for producing nitrogen fertilizer from natural gas. The Haber-Bosch process is generally considered one of the greatest innovations known to mankind. Similarly, in 1942, a Midwestern farm boy graduated from the university with a doctorate in plant pathology and genetics. Norman Borlaug would become the father of the Green Revolution, and his research improving wheat varieties that could resist lodging while utilizing greater amounts of nitrogen fertilizer would lead to dramatic production increases in undeveloped countries like Mexico, Pakistan, and India. Because of his research, it is estimated he saved 1 billion lives across the globe. The Haber-Bosch process and the Green Revolution singularly addressed food supply. Today, the problem is much more complex. We need to produce significantly more food and use clean energy while protecting the environment for future generations. In the spirit of Dr. Borlaug, our research team is striving to meet the grand challenge of feeding the world and sustaining the environment through a green nutrient revolution. I wish to thank you and our college dean, Dr. Burr, for the privilege of speaking with you today. I also wish to thank the board and the administration for their past support of renewable energy research efforts at the West Central Research and Outreach Center. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Regent Beeson, members of the boards. I asked Gabe Gethsemane to join us today to talk just briefly about the public-private partnerships we're attempting to engage and move beyond where we are now. So with that, a few words, and then we'll open, I think, for questions from the board.
Good morning again. I think Brian Moore explained during his presentation the complexity of the biological systems in agriculture and food production. And that's the main motivation that brings PepsiCo at the table in establishing a partnership with the university. Because over the last couple of decades, large corporations like PepsiCo realized that you need a complexity of skill set to address complex problems. And certainly a large institution like the University of Minnesota brings that complexity of skill sets already interconnected with each other. So the benefit to PepsiCo certainly is the access to that very vibrant scientific community and that diversity of skill set. But then PepsiCo hopes to participate in the process by contributing one of the possible avenues of then taking the innovation to fruition to the human population. Certainly the other avenues being education and extension and cooperation across universities around the world and public foundations, but also bringing a direct commercial impact in products that touch billions of consumers every day. Among the various institutions that we interact with, we have identified the University of Minnesota as a key partner because of its history and tradition in the food supply, and particularly in crops of dear interest to us in the grain space and in the potato and vegetable spaces. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. At this point, we'll open the thanks all presenters for this very informative presentation. It certainly makes the point, the new complexity, the added complexity of the subject matter and the interconnectedness of all of them. Regent Johnson, let's start with you, if we could.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, thank you all for your work and presentation today. As I was reflecting back on the strategic plan, and Regent Broad talked about connecting all of Minnesota, especially rural areas, your work is what gathers all of Minnesota to this university in the whole area of agriculture and water and food supply and so on and so forth. So thank you very much, because greater Minnesota is very interested, as all of Minnesota is, but especially, you know, the agricultural farming community is very cognizant of the kind of work you're doing. Now I have a question to the beekeeper, Dr. Masterman. By the way, I was part of the group that went to your beehive and saw the conditions in which you work, and we're very hopeful that that is going to be vastly improve for the future. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask anyway. Are there currently use of pesticides for crops that are very obnoxious to bees? And if so, are we making progress in not using those pesticides and chemicals?
So when it comes to, there are two different issues that we've realized, and I think the big word around, as far as pesticides is concerned, is neonicotinoids. That's getting a lot of people's attention because it's a systemic insecticide, and what happens is that the plant takes it up and it can be in a plant, a crop plant, the entire season. It can be in somebody's perennial garden for a year or more. And so the pesticide issue that we've found really is divided into an urban cosmetic issue versus the agricultural issues. And the agricultural community has a history of trying to work with the beekeepers in order to protect the bees. So there are a lot of programs and there's a lot of awareness in place in order to protect the bees. The recent information regarding neonicotinoids is showing that it turns out that if a pesticide doesn't kill an insect, it might really injure the insect because of a sublethal effect. And there is research being done in our lab about how some pesticides can, although it doesn't have a direct impact by killing the insect, it can really injure the queens of the colonies and then eventually cause a colony to die. So there are definitely issues, but I also want to stress that the farming community is definitely trying to help as far as making sure that they're using very bee-safe practices. And the use of neonicotinoids specifically was, everybody was excited about it because it would avoid any spray issues with the colonies. So it would be put on the seed and then you would have, you wouldn't have to worry about drift, so.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Chair Beeson.
Regent McMillan.
Thank you. Had I read ahead and looked at some of these examples, I might have not needed to ask the question I did about connecting our land grant mission with grand challenges, because there's some tremendous examples of how Provost Hanson and President Kaler answered my question. So love to see this stuff, and if we can get average Minnesotans, business, industry, policymakers to know what we're doing here, it really helps with our stakeholders. Great, great stuff. Quick question that will betray my interest in energy here. As we look at what we're learning about producing hydrogen and ammonia, hydrogen's are a economically achievable source of hydrogen. The biggest issue with deploying fuel cell technology, which would be great for the energy world. Are we learning anything about the production of hydrogen that we can translate in that world? Because the world would be waiting for a good, cheap source of hydrogen.
Chair Beeson,
Yes.
I would say that our focus on our research is using that hydrogen. I know that across the nation there's efforts to reduce the cost of producing hydrogen. One of the participants in our wind to hydrogen to ammonia pilot plant was Proton On Site, a company located in Connecticut, and they are making great strides in reducing the cost of hydrogen and utilizing wind energy to produce hydrogen. I think that is one of the challenges moving forward is making production of both hydrogen and nitrogen fertilizer more efficient and economical at a small scale using renewable resources right here in Minnesota. And I think that, as I mentioned, the research that is going on in the chemical engineering department as well as biosystems and bioproducts engineering is going a long ways to accomplish that goal.
Excellent. Thank you.
Regent Omari.
Thank you, Chair Beeson. Thank you all for the presentations. I echo the fact that you guys are solving the grand challenges, and we appreciate that. It's very inspiring. So I'm thinking from the perspective of the city boy that I am, and I'm trying to, so ag ed seems to be going really well, and it's happening and it seems to be effective. How important is it for the I suppose, average or my mother, who would have not understood even the beginning of this presentation, how important is it to give information to someone like her or the city boy that I am about what's happening, and then what can we do to help for the average person that's wherever, who's not going to come and do the work that you do necessarily? Every day, what can we do, and how important is it to spread that message?
Interim Dean Bureau.
Yeah. Regent Beeson, Chair Beeson, Regent Omari. That's a great question, because it is, as we look at the opportunities within urban city areas to get people engaged, I think there is a disconnect that we talk about oftentimes between what's happening on the production side and what's happening with the food they consume every day. And what we're trying to do is we actually have some urban agriculture programs now. The horticulture department, for example, is working with schools and community-assisted or community-supported agriculture to start to bring the realities of whether it's local foods, organic foods, those types of pieces into communities. And that localization of it, where I think one of the challenges with food is that you consume it every day, but you don't experience, as you're saying, the production of it every day. And just getting engaged in that production is part of that story. So we really welcome the advancements being made around the local food movements that really build that awareness of what those challenges are. People learn pretty quickly. We had a student speaking at the Borlaug event that talked about doing research trials in plant pathology, and her research experiment got infected with aphids. And so right off the bat, she learned that, her experiment, which was her goal to getting further education, was being compromised by a disease. Now imagine that occurring in a garden, or for someone who's in, certainly globally in a very poor village trying to feed themselves. But I think we have a role, and we have not, I would agree, we haven't done a very good job historically of expressing that story, that those lives, the civilization, the communities are all engaged in that food production process, and then trying to explain in accessible terms, because we talk a lot, we sign, as we did the Green Revolution, we turned it into science, and that's where we talk about with Ag Ed, bringing that agricultural literacy into the fold, so trying to get agriculture into STEM curriculum, so that then more students across the country can get exposed. And because it is something we eat, of course we're eating food every day, it does build a connection where you can very easily do stories about, how important is nutrition, how important are, issues of pesticides, herbicides, environmental issues. You can bring in natural resource issues. So we think it's a very rich foundation for coming into city kids and get them informed about what's happening. It's a great learning piece. We actually see in the research that as we bring that sort of contextual learning into a classroom related to biology or physics or chemistry, bring in wind energy and hydrogen and nitrogen, that students do perform better. They advance their scoring goes up higher with those sorts of experiential pieces. So we think there's huge opportunity to bring that in. So thank you for raising that question.
Regent Johnson.
Thank you. A follow-up question from the rural and agricultural community. As you are, and Minnesota farmers are attempting to move forward in crop production, one of the things that I hear quite often is the conflict between Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the EPA, and those regulatory agencies. And it's stifling, if you will. At the same time, the farmer wants to be protective of the environment, and there's a logjam, if you will, on many fronts. Could you just briefly comment, environmental protection, production kind of area, please?
Chair Beeson, Regent Johnson.
Yes.
Another great question, and this is a role where the university can truly excel. I work with quite a few farmers, and I'm well aware of the potential conflict there. And as they work with government agencies, of course, their role, they do have educational programs, they have programs to assist in water resource abatement, quality issues, but ultimately they're a regulatory agency. And so you inherently set up a conflict of potential goals and so on. Where the university comes into that is we can provide, the science, what is happening with the use of application of nitrogen, fertilizers, whatever the environmental issue is, how we can improve water quality, and then also bring together with regulators, agencies, for example, with producers to better understand, okay, what are the solutions we can provide to this? And an example of that right now, many of you may know Deb Swackhammer. She's been the director of the Water Resource Center here at the University of Minnesota for several years, has done a great job of bringing information, knowledge, research into the water area. we're opening, she's retiring, and so we're looking for a new person to lead that water resource center. So we're already working and engaging with several of the regulatory agencies in Minnesota. We're working with farm groups who have activities here. And what we're trying to do is build a convening environment where we can start to address these. They're difficult issues. We're affecting people's livelihoods and how they produce agriculture. We're concerned about, of course, downstream effects on groundwater. And so we serve that role of both the science and then convening and engaging that conversation. And we think you go to aquatic invasive species, you go to quality issues, it's urgent we do that. So we're looking forward to working on that in the coming 6 months or so to address those issues. And I think we have a huge role to play in exactly those kinds of questions.
Sure.
Follow-up question.
Mr. Chairman, totally a different issue, but as Dr. Reese is talking about the West Central Research and Outreach Center, I'm just reminded of someone. Last Friday evening I attended the wake of Senator Charlie Berg, who for many years represented the Morris area and was quite instrumental in the promotion of the University of Minnesota Morris and the Research Center. And he was 89 years of age. He was a unique individual. I served with him for 28 years, and agriculture was at the heart of his public policy. And I was thinking about, as you were all talking about Senator Charlie Berg, he was a unique individual. He served as a Republican, as a Democrat, and as an independent. He covered all the bases before he went to his eternal rest.
Thank you, Regent Johnson. Regent Devine.
I'd like to thank all of you this morning for your presentation. It was very thorough, very complete, very interesting. Yesterday morning, we, at the start of our meetings here, we had a session over in St. Paul with a number of legislators that were invited to attend a legislative breakfast. And I would say that there were 3 or 4 that specifically asked about the work that we were doing as it related to the aquatic invasive species and the bee projects specifically because it's in the bonding request bill. One of the questions that was asked that I didn't really have a response for was, what are we going to be doing to really tell the story to the public, and following up with what Regent Omari just had mentioned, to further expand. And they were, I think one part of it was directed towards what uses are we going to use of extension across the state to tell more of the story, or to solicit and to help in our work that we're going to be doing in those initiatives that are happening after we get our new lab work hopefully completed.
Interim Dean.
Chair Beeson, Regent Devine. Well, there's many avenues. We do have extension programs, for example, associated with AIS right now. They're not working directly with the funded project on that. But one of the things we're proposing, because we're doing the new terrestrial invasive species as well, so there's, of course, the promotion through research, published papers, those kinds of things that come out, news, working with press releases, the general marketing piece. In many of these aspects, particularly invasive species, is a great opportunity. We look at citizen science engagement, and it was a little bit to Regent Omari's question, is how do you engage the community actually in doing that science? So in invasive species, Peter Sorensen now is working with Lake Improvement District associations, and part of it is monitoring and control, and seeing where carp go in the winter is the way I put it, I guess, as they're fishing out there. You can collect data from people who are out on the lake in the winter, and because they know that carp populate certain regions, they move within the lake to where they're going. And so with the terrestrial invasive species, we're actually, as we're proposing that, putting in that specifically citizen engagement along with university researchers, so that you start to build, of course, with the people affected, it's partly helping with the science, sort of crowdsourcing aspects. And then as you build that engagement, you're more able to go out into communities and express what those results are, because people are living. It's kind of we think of ourselves as a living laboratory in CFANS. So we're out there in the community, in the natural areas, working on these problems. The more we can engage people, you sort of have an automatic relationship that builds where they get the value from the research that's done. So we're thinking very carefully about some opportunities to do those kinds of things.
Thank you. I think it would be wise to, and I'll ask staff to arrange a presentation that you might make to our Regent Dave Larson, who's had decades experience in agribusiness. I know he wanted to hear this presentation today. He's not able to be here, but that is obviously our most experienced ag person here on the Board of Regents, so hopefully we can have that occur. We're going to move along here then. Thank you very, very much, all the presenters.
Thank you.
And partners. We did not, board, we did not have a series of committee meetings other than we had litigation review committee, and Regent Larson, Regent McMillan, and myself were participants in that. That met on March 26, 2014. A resolution was considered and passed that authorized closing of that meeting. In the closed meeting, a discussion was held of matters that are subject to attorney-client privilege. Is there any old business today? Is there any new business? On that note, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.
Very good.